Sally Face is a hidden gem with a brilliant story with many turns and twists. In today's video, we'll go over the story and explain certain aspects of the game. Hi folks, I'm R, your narrator. This video will contain spoilers of the game. With that said, let's begin. Sal loses his mother to a gunshot by a mysterious man in a dog mask, leaving his face badly deformed in the process, which he wears a mask to cover. Nobody believes Sal about what he saw, and they pass this murder as an incident with a dog killing her. Sal moves into a new apartment with his father following this incident, where he experiences encounters with ghosts and believes that the apartment complex is haunted. He finds a few friends called Larry, Ashley and Todd, who aid him into uncovering what mysteries lay within this building. His journey unveils dark and twisted secrets which put the world at stake, which he tries to save. Sal Fisher, or as titled, Sally Face, wakes up in a hospital with his face wrapped in bloodied bandages in 1984. You might mistake Sal as a girl due to the way the blue hair is tied and the multiple earrings, but in fact, Sal is a boy, something that confused me before researching about the game as well. This is an element that will play a strong part in Sal's story and development of his personality. He gets a call which encourages him to go to his mother's grave, Diane Fisher, whom we learned to have died in a tragic accident while they were having a picnic, leaving Sal with a deformed face, hence the bloodied bandages. Stuck in a surreal kind of world, Sal makes his way to the grave, talking to a presumably imaginary dog who insists not to be a good dog as he buried her alive, suggestive of Diane. This encounter will be important later in the game, which we will get back to later. Sal finally finds his mother lying in bed, which brings us to the current time where Sal is explaining his dream to his psychiatrist. When Dr. Enon, the psychiatrist, asks about a body from the apartment Sal and his dad moved to after the accident, we skip ahead to the first episode of the game. An important element to consider is that Sal doesn't wear his face prosthetic in front of Dr. Enon, as seen by the mask lying on the table, meaning that Sal is trying to be honest with Dr. Enon as he usually doesn't take his mask off. The story goes back when Sal and his dad moved into a new apartment following his mother's death. It directly appears that Sal's dad is a compassionate father, supporting Sal despite Sal's dream where Henry, Sal's dad, blames the death of Diane on Sal. Sal decides to go on exploring the new building to get to know more people. He learns about a murder that's under investigation currently, which raises his curiosity. As he goes on exploring more, he stumbles upon Lisa, who introduces Sal to her son, Larry. Larry is a metal music lover and a character unlike others who's fond of Sal's face prosthetic. In their conversation, Sal informs Larry that he's also called Sally Face, a name his bullies were calling him when he decided to embrace it, not showing any sensitivity towards it, which would stop the bullies having an upper hand. Larry informs Sal that he has a police dispatch radio in his room, which comes in handy as they use it to distract the police officer guarding room 403, where Mrs. Sanderson was murdered, in order for Sal to sneak in and snoop around. Larry hands Sal a walkie-talkie to talk to each other while carrying out the plan. When Sal enters Mrs. Sanderson's apartment, he notices a clearing of the blood in the shape of one of glitter ponies Mrs. Sanderson was collecting, a direct parody of My Little Ponies show. Talking to Larry, or exploring the building in more depth, we learn about Charlie, in room 204, who Larry claims to have witnessed to commit the murder. Sal uses his dad's sleeping pills and a cup of tea from Mr. Addison, the owner of the building, to knock Charlie out and take one of his glitter ponies as evidence to the detective in the building. This leads to Charlie being detained and taken away from the building. Sal snooping around even more around the coroner's van, he finds the corpse of Mrs. Sanderson, with her scalp cut open exposing her brain. We then flash back into current time with Sal continuing his conversation with his psychiatrist. We learn from their conversation that Sal was only 15 years old at that time. Dr. Enon continues by saying that Charlie was proven not to be guilty after spending several years behind bars, which Sal still insists that Charlie is guilty. We soon learn that Sal is a grown-up now, and that he lost touch with Larry after graduation, and now is an inmate awaiting a trial for mass murder, which we will get back to later. A few months into living in the Addison apartment, Sal becomes overwhelmed with nightmares. One of his time during the tragic picnic, and one where he sees himself as Larry during the time he witnessed Mrs. Sanderson's death. After confining these dreams in Larry takes Sal to his treehouse where he tells Sal about his father, and that he suddenly disappeared without any notes or taking any of his belongings. Larry continues that he accidentally killed the pet rabbit of Mrs. Gibson by a firework, another resident of the building, which he goes to check on. After being shouted at by Mrs. Gibson, he tries to go down the building when he sees a red-eyed demon who touches Larry. After that, bad things keep on happening to him. This makes Larry to believe that he's cursed after killing the bunny. Sal believing what Larry says, as he saw a similar-looking demon earlier in Larry's kitchen, he decides to help Larry break his curse. Sal retrieves a mysterious puzzle box from Larry's father's possessions and plans on summoning the ghost of Megan from apartment number 504 to prove to Larry that the building is haunted by ghosts, a ghost Sal had a few encounters with before. After failing his attempt, Larry refers Sal to Todd Morrison, another resident of the building, a firm believer of supernatural, yet a genius in technology. Upon entering Todd's apartment, Sal meets Ashley Campbell, who Sal becomes immediately attracted to, who was in Todd's apartment for some help in math lessons. Todd instructs Sal to retrieve some more items to amplify Sal's Gear Boy gaming device to communicate with the supernatural. After modifying Sal's Gear Boy, Sal manages to summon the ghost of Greg, who weeps about falling in love with a married woman, which leads to the murder of Stacy and her daughter, Megan, apparently due to the red-eyed demon. Greg soon leaves as he mentions the red-eyed demon is present within the building. After this encounter, Todd is a little shook, but Sal, on the other hand, maintains his cool. Sal uses his Gear Boy several times more before meeting with Todd again, who tells Sal that the officers who were present on the day of the investigation for Mrs. Sanderson's murder are not registered within the police database, and the mugshots of Charlie are from a different person than the one Sal met. They also retrieve some old information about Megan's death, which seems to be falsified. This raises suspicion if the government and the bigger organizations have a hand in a conspiracy, which turns out to be true later in the game, with a cult having control over a large portion of Earth and still expanding to take full control. They obtain Megan's necklace and use it with the Gear Boy to successfully summon her ghost. Their interaction is brief, but Sal learns the report about Megan's death in Lake Wendigo is false, as she never went fishing, but her father, Luke Holmes, often did with Larry's father, Jim Johnson. Sal, through playing a game on his Gear Boy, learns that Luke and Jim were members of a cult group called the Devourers of God, who summoned the red-eyed demon. After completing the game, Sal then meets the hanged ghost of Luke, of which the red-eyed demon comes out of. Presumably he committed suicide after realizing that he's becoming possessed by the red-eyed demon. The red-eyed demon becomes menacing, but before he could do anything, Larry intervenes using a new crafted tool by Todd, which destroys evil spirits. With the red-eyed demon seemingly gone for good, Larry bursts in tears about his father's disappearance, at which point Sal comforts him. After Flash, Sal is back with Dr. Enon, who doesn't believe Sal's stories. After Sal's persistence, Dr. Enon decides to visit the treehouse and see for himself if Sal is telling the truth or not. Upon visiting the treehouse, we see the Addison apartment to have become abandoned. In the treehouse, Dr. Enon sees the ghost of Larry, who tells Dr. Enon to help Sal out of jail as there's more to the story. But this unfortunately ends up with Dr. Enon freaking out and falling off the tree, dying instantly. Following this, Sal's trial approaches when he is interviewed by a journalist called Claire Nettles, who looks very suspicious as she has stitches on her scalp, similar to how Mrs. Sanderson's scalp was cut. Maybe an indication of how specific members of cult are brainwashed. Through this interview, we learn that Sal has some sort of problem with baloney, which instigates a new flashback story. Sal is in high school where a bully by the name of Travis punches Sal, spilling some blood. Larry comes to the aid of Sal and suggests they should make Travis pay when Sal persists on letting it go. Things seem normal after the events of the Red-Eyed Demon until the lunch day when they are served bologna sandwich. Sal notes that the bologna tastes stranger than usual and suggests to investigate its origins. His group of friends, excluding Chug and Maple, agree to investigate, which consists of Ashley, Todd, Larry, and himself. They first try to ask the lunch lady about where the meat comes from, which makes her act very defensive and refuses to talk to them. They pass some assumptions that she might be responsible for the meat's unusual nature, and it might be her revenge for not liking kids and being unhappy generally. After investigating a bit more, Larry and Sal learn that Kim, the lunch lady, used to be an amateur nature photographer. Sal thinks on his feet and takes a picture of a bird and presents it to Kim to extract some information. Kim then informs Sal that the bologna supplier is Mrs. Packerton and presents Sal with a sample of the bologna. Meanwhile, Sal finds Travis weeping in a toilet stall where they have a heart-to-heart and seemingly get on good terms. Sal and Larry then break into Mrs. Packerton's room where they find cult-like objects, including an item similar to Larry's father's puzzle books. Yet again, Sal starts to have encounters with supernatural, and the phantom that kept on appearing to Sal with indecipherable sentences. Larry alongside Sal break into apartment 201, Mrs. Packerton's apartment. They discover a severed head of a goat with some satanic ritualistic symbols in the refrigerator, and 2 locked doors. Upon managing to open the complicated first door, they find Mr. Packerton tied up to a bed and hooked up to life support, in a pretty bad state, with diapers on, seeming as if Mrs. Packerton is not taking care of him. Sal summons his ghost, who begs Sal to pull the plug and end his suffering. Sal complies and hides with Larry as they hear the door open, assuming that Mrs. Packerton is back. It turns out it's only Ashley, to Larry and Sal's relief, while they think they're about to die. Larry finds the key to the next door, which turns out to be a butchery with missing child posters hung up on the wall, and more satanic symbols. There also seems to be an incinerator, which is another sign of what is to come. Sal alongside his friends find a freezer, where they find deboned flesh of the missing children, including their faces, organs, limbs, and eyes separated. To their disgust, they realize what the source of the bologna is: their missing classmates. They try to devise a plan to deal with Mrs. Packerton, as they believe the police is even on it, with the cult she's involved in. Meanwhile, Ashley finds a hidden trash chute leading to somewhere mysterious as the building doesn't have trash chutes. Ashley accidentally falls into the chute and both Larry and Sal decide to save her. They fetch Todd, and after another paranormal encounter with the Phantom, Sal knows where the chute ends. They find a hidden cellar under the carpet, which Mrs. Packerton's key opens. As they investigate down the cellar, they find a cryptic dungeon-like place with satanic statues implying a temple for cultists. There are cryptic scriptures on the walls, with one mentioning that they are the devourers of God, resembling the Gear Boy game Sal played previously. After exploring the place, they find several chute-ends with blood smears having piles of bones beneath them, presumably the bones of the victims of this cult. They find an unconscious Ashley on top of one of the piles, who is miraculously unharmed. After safely extracting Ashley and leaving the temple, they discuss what to do to Mrs. Packerton, not to harm anyone anymore. To Sal's horror, the group suggests killing her. Sal convinces them to sleep on it, which turns out to work out perfectly, as the next morning, they learn Mrs. Packerton was killed by a drunk driver on her way back home that night, also killing the driver. Going back to the interview with the journalist, the interviewer shows Sal a newspaper article that Ashley is willing to testify against Sal in regards to the mass murder trial Sal is allegedly in custody for. Sal sheds a tear and asks about the well-being of Todd. Todd is held in a padded room with a straitjacket who wants to die, apparently the result of what happened after the night of mass murder, which will later learn to be the result of him becoming possessed by a demon summoned by the cult. We then go back 5 years after the death of Mrs. Packerton. Things seem to have returned back to normal, with Lisa married to Henry now, Sal's father, making Sal and Larry stepbrothers. Sal lives in a house now in Knoxville suburbs, presumably, which Todd has set up for friends to share during their years in college, introducing a new character called Neil, who's Todd's partner. Normal doesn't last, however, when Sal is haunted by nightmares again. Larry and Sal go on investigating the Addison apartments again and the temple, before Sal goes on a date with Ashley to Lake Wendigo. Sal confides in her the details of the returning nightmares and the ongoing investigation on the local cult. Meanwhile, Sal collects several VHS tapes which reveal cryptic messages from an unknown woman, possibly from another dimension, which we will get back to in later videos. After the date, Sal receives disturbing text messages from Larry insinuating that he's about to end his life. Sal tries to call Larry, but he doesn't pick up. Sal then rushes to the treehouse where he finds Larry's suicide note, saying that the darkness was about to possess and infect him. Back in the courtroom, Ashley in her testimony talks about what happened after the date. Sal calls Ashley, who seemingly had just stopped crying. Ashley joins Sal in the treehouse but doesn't see any corpse. She finds a bottle of booze and ends up arguing with Sal as he was very jittery, seemingly not believing him. Ashley informs the jury that Sal never drank as he was worried that he would become an alcoholic as it runs in his family. But this was a special case. Sal then investigates the treehouse and finds a bottle of booze, seemingly belonging to Larry. Sal then suddenly teleports to the roof of the building where he sees the ghost of Larry, after some flashing visions of the cultists. Using the newly modified ghost communicator Todd had put up together with a guitar, Sal uses it to destroy the cultists' pillars and free the trapped ghosts by the Endless One, another evil entity, for at least a short while. Sal manages to enter Terrence Addison's apartment, where he sees Terrence being stuck in a goo-like monster, the Endless One, who has tainted all of the residents of the building with darkness. After using the guitar to fight the monster, Sal sees a child figure of Mr. Addison. He informs Sal that he's tried to fight the monster and hold it as long as he could, but the only way left is to kill all the hosts and stop it from spreading further and infecting the entire Earth. Terrence leaves a kitchen knife behind, letting Sal kill everyone in the building, including his parents, Chuck, and his little child, Soda. Sal then encounters Todd, who seems to have become possessed by evil, who says that after the treehouse, he teleported to the temple, seeing himself tied up with the cultists, drawing some of his blood. He says that he doesn't feel good, possibly being the next in line to be possessed after Larry. After leaving the building, Sal is greeted by a horrified Ashley and the Knoxville police. Ashley, unconvinced about the paranormal, calls the police and testifies that Sal needs help as he's not a bad person. She also mentions the medication he was taking, implying that Sal suffered periodic psychosis possibly. At the testimony stall, next stands a different-looking Dr. Enon, who testifies against Sal, saying that he was 100% lucid during the murder, and that Sal is making everything up. He even mentions that he visited the Addison apartments and found inconsistencies in the story. By now, we should know that this character is disguising as Dr. Enon, possibly another member of the cult, trying to get rid of Sal, just like how the police reports Todd found in earlier episodes were fabricated. In the trial, the jury passes the verdict for Sal to be guilty. The judge therefore orders the capital punishment for Sal to be executed in 3 years. An interesting evidence that could show how powerful the cult is when a reporter on TV with the same name of the journalist Claire Nettles reports on a local fire. The journalist who interviews Sal looks completely different and has a large stitch site on her scalp, meaning that she has been replaced and she is part of the cult as well. Meanwhile, Ashley makes several attempts to pass Sal as mentally insane, but she fails, until the day of his execution, when she gets a bright idea to investigate and provide some evidence that Sal is telling the truth. Ashley goes to the treehouse and meets Larry's ghost. She takes a picture and rushes to the prison, but it's too late as Sal is already strapped to the electric chair and she watches him die. Now, a determined Ashley, with help of Neil, Todd's boyfriend, decides to free Todd from the cultists and cleanse infected people with some sort of cure. They also plan to blow up the cult's temple with some C4 Neil stole from the military. They assume the cult has control over a large portion of organizations, including police, hospitals, churches, media, and more. We learn that Maple, the sole survivor of the building, is now almost fully possessed by darkness and is held captive in the basement, not to cause harm to herself and others. This proves what Mr. Addison said about darkness tainting the residents of the building, and that Sal did the right thing, killing everyone in the building. There's a journal about how Maple progressively became worse over the span of 2 months, which suggests that she is becoming more infected by day. In another note Ashley finds, there's a prophecy that a person stands up against the cult, which seems to be no other than Sal, called the Child of the Abomination. And that is why the cult was so desperately trying to destroy Sal. There also seems to be a mysterious character sending them intel about the activities of the cult, who seems to be a member inside, who we will get back to later in the video. Ashley, under the instruction of Larry, burns down the treehouse in order to break the binding spell and free Larry from being stuck there. This unfortunately makes Larry disappear, with Ashley unable to make any further connection with him, throwing Larry into the void. Ashley then goes to carry out the plan with Neil, but doesn't find him anywhere. She picks up the C4s and heads to the Phelps Ministry, belonging to Travis's father, to finish the job. She plants the bombs and finds Neil and Maple in the dungeon cells. While there, Ashley gets approached by a cultist who turns out to be Travis, the person who has been sending them intel and helping them. In other words, the old bully of Sal, who Sal befriended. With the help of Travis, Ashley leaves the ministry in one piece and revisits Sal's grave. Ashley prays to Sal to come back, when suddenly we find Sal in an interdimension, resembling the phantom Sal used to talk to. There are two fighting forces there, light and dark. Light encouraging Sal to recollect himself and balance himself, while the dark discourages Sal and tells him to give in to his dreams. Within this interdimension, Sal meets Mr. Johnson, Larry's father, the phantom who kept on trying to communicate with Sal. He informs Sal that he can still fight the cult, as he obtained a certain ability to travel between parallel realities after his death. He instructs Sal to collect 3 pyramids to get back to his world. For that, he has to travel to different realms. In these different realms, Sal transforms into different versions of himself, visualized by different art styles. In one of the different worlds, Sal goes back to the picnic site, where his mother was killed. It's then when he reveals that his mother was killed by a man in a dog mask, which no one believes, possibly a member of the cult who wanted to stop the prophecy, but they failed, as Sal only suffered facial injuries as Diane protected Sal, guarding him with her body, with the fragments of bullets going through her body and deforming Sal's face. It's possible that the coroners passed Sal's mother's death as an incident due to the influence of the cult, even though she was murdered by a gunshot. We also learned that Sal had a pink mask, as his mother loved the color pink. That is why it is a segment of his default mask, as a possible memory for his mother. With Ashley's help, cutting her arm as sacrifice to bring Sal back, Sal picks up the Sword of Osiris in a different realm and reincarnates as an arm, attached to Ashley, which provides Ashley with immense power, while still able to communicate with Sal. Ashley, confident that she can destroy the cult now, as the prophecy suggests, with the child of the abomination, Sal, she goes to Phelps' church. In there, Sal's scattered soul in a different dimension finds a note with breakdowns of the history of the cult in a lab, which goes back to when the colonists arrived in the Knoxville town. It explains how the natives merged with the colonists and the first temple was built, how the prophecy came around that the child of the abomination will come to destroy them, and how they planned his execution when he comes, and how they used Terence Edison's soul to bring about the Endless One, to draw powers from it. A letter is also found that Larry's father, Jim, who writes to Larry and Lisa that he left to protect them, as he was approached by the cult to join them, and thought the only way he could protect them was through leaving without a trace. He also informs them that the cult is planning on killing all the children across globe, as they're summoning demons from Cosmic without understanding them very well, as is backed up from a previous note from a cultist in the lab that they don't understand these monsters very well. Jem mentions how much he loved his family and how heartbroken he is to leave. Ashley then goes to the ceremonial sacrificing chamber, where the Archbishop Phelps is commencing the ceremony, with Maple and Neil killed already and hooked upside down, and an alive Todd awaiting his death. Ashley uses her powerful new arm to destroy some of the cultists. Meanwhile, Sal meets an aged Larry who got lost in the void after the treehouse burnt down and found his way back. They hug each other. Larry hands Sal the ghost-busting guitar Todd had made before and manages to destroy a red-eyed monster. Back to Ashley, he fights the Archbishop for a while until Travis stabs his dad, the Archbishop, with a sword, and both fall into the pit, presumably killing them. After a lengthy battle with the monsters in different dimensions and by Larry, Sal, and Ashley, the demons all seem to be defeated and the church destroyed. This seemingly revives Todd and saves the world. Larry says his goodbyes and leaves as he can't stay in this realm anymore, while Sal hopes that they will meet again one day. This leaves us with some additional information, with Sal and Ashley still fighting to stop the darkness from spreading, and with Todd trying to control his darkness and maybe one day take advantage of it. That's about it for this video, folks. If you like this video, stay tuned for the ending explained, where I will expand on the ending and hidden information lurking within the game. It's been your host R. Till the next video, have a fantastic day.